Bruce here in an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Weezer. And Weezer formed in Los Angeles in 1992 and went on to become one of the most popular bands of the 90s. You know, the grunge and alternative revolution decade. But Weezer's really not grunge or alternative. I've always called them nerd rock, but I've also heard them called, alternative rock, geek rock, trash rock, power pop. So I'm not really a fan of putting labels on music or bands, but sometimes it does help just to separate, certain artists or groups, and kind of put them in different categories. And I've always used the term nerd rock, and you can go all the way back, to groups like the Talking Heads and Devo, which definitely had the right image, a little bit of that nerdy kind of sound. And then you fast forward, eventually you hit Weezer and Cake and Presidents of the United States of America and Nerf Herder. There's a whole bunch of nerd rock bands out there. But I really do like this style, and I guess it's because I'm a big nerd. The guitarist and vocalist and frontman Ric Cuomo is a really interesting musician, and I've been following Weezer ever since they hit the scene. And I distinctly remember hearing, Undone, the Sweater song on the radio, and I wasn't really that impressed. But then a few months later, I was sitting in front of the TV, MTV was on, and the world premiere of the Buddy Holly video came on. And I was sitting there with my arms crossed, getting ready to trash it or, tear it apart. And then it opens, and they're in Arnold's, from Happy Days, and I was blown away, and I'd never seen a video like that. And I just sat there, stunned, and it had this connection with me. I mean, mainly because my sister and I used to watch Happy Days a lot. But there was just, this lowering of my defenses, and I started to listen to it and watched it, and I liked it. And I thought, you know what, maybe I was wrong about these guys. It's kind of fun and nerdy, quirky, and a little awkward. And definitely, Weezer's a great band. And I'm a big fan of the albums Pinkerton and Maladroit. Those two are kind of lesser known. Definitely, cult status kind of Weezer albums, but they're not your pop, kind of radio-friendly albums. They're a little darker and a little more personal. One little factoid about Weezer a lot of people seem to forget is the late great legend, from the Cars, Ric Ocasek. He produced, 3 albums with Weezer. And definitely, 2 of those albums were extremely popular, the Blue Album and the Green Album. But that's one little area of their history that sometimes I forget that too, and it's like, oh yeah, Ric Ocasek worked with Weezer. The opening, that's Perfect Situation from the Make Believe album, and I was actually using the TC Electronic Ditto looper again to kind of play, both guitar parts at the same time. You've got that kind of octave-based, melodic solo in the beginning, and then you have these power chords, underneath. And the rhythm part here is going to reveal kind of a secret chord in Weezer's vocabulary, and it's these stacked power chords, or at least that's what I call them. They're really just slash chords, but I like to call them stacked power chords because we're technically playing a power chord there. But we're doing this. Basic, and this lesson's going to be great as far as fundamentals and basic chords, perfect for beginners and intermediate players. You advanced players out there probably aren't going to find a lot in this lesson, maybe some of the later examples. So this is really basic, but we've got G5, and then here's that stacked power chord. It's a D5 over A right there. So those have that huge kind of mammoth power chord sound. Find those in tons of Weezer songs, but also songs from Metallica and Dream Theater and a ton of stuff. But right there at D5 over A. Let's move over to an A5 right there, an A power chord. And then go back to that D5 over A. Next is American Gigolo from the Maladroit album, and we're in standard tuning for this one. But if you haven't heard Maladroit by Weezer, that's one of my favorite Weezer albums for sure. It's hard rockin', there's guitar solos, these heavier riffs, it's very unlike other Weezer albums, but something like this. this climbing kind of power chord, you know, it's really aggressive. Right there, it's just two Fs, two F sharps, and two Gs. And then you're going to switch to those stacked power chords once again. So there's C5 over G, and then C sharp over G sharp, or C sharp 5 over G sharp, and then D5 over A right there. So it's kind of answering that first part, you know, the F sharp and G, but it's answering it with those stacked power chords. Palm muting, kind of bring it down for the verse. You know, cool song, that's a cool riff too. Next is Take Control, which is also from the Maladroit album, and this one's tuned down a half step, but something like this. So that opening riff, it reminds me, it's like a big, you know, 70s kind of guitar riff. Think, you know, Cat Scratch Fever and some of that kind of stuff, and you got this. So you're literally playing this partial A to a partial C. You're also, you know, opening up those, the D and the G string there for that partial G, like this. Slide this G to G sharp right there. Then you hear a single note riff right here. You're just moving between that A, G, and that C note right there. Kind of funky, it's got a groove to it. And then once again, we've got stacked power chords. It's a C5 over G, and you're just banging on it. And then D5 over A, and bang on that. Go back to that C5 over G, and bang on it. Back to that D over A. Then you hear him kind of get rhythmic on this A and G power chord. Go back to that C over G, and then you hear this F G kind of back and forth. And go right back to that opening riff. Next we have Say It Ain't So from the Blue album, and we're tuned down a half step on this one. It's a very famous guitar part, something like this. With the C sharp minor 7 chord, and you're basically barring the 4th fret and then adding, you know, these 2 additional notes on to form that chord. Something like that. And then you're going to do this, which is very unusual. So it's a G sharp add sharp 9. So think of a G sharp major bar chord, and then you're lifting up the bar right there, and you're just basically grabbing that open B string along with the C note right there. You know, which has a very bizarre sound, but you hear him basically do this. pick through that chord, and he's basically, centering on that tension and that kind of dissonance in that chord. Then you want to basically slide into A major and return to, like a bar chord, format right there. And then move to a partial E. Then you're going to basically do this kind of Hendrixy R&B move right there. A cool guitar part, and I love that kind of R&B soul kind of feel to it. Speaking of weird chords, check out the opening from Undone, the Sweater Song from the Blue album, and we're still tuned down a half step here, but there's some really bizarro chords happening during this intro. So that opening chord, that's going to be a G6 add sharp 9. So once again, Rivers is flirting with that sharp 9 tonality. Like that. So that's a very odd chord. And then you're going to move that G root note over to C, and then that's going to change to a C major 7 add sharp 6. Or sharp 13, I guess you could think of. Then you're going to take that, move it up a whole step, and that's just a D13 now. And then go back to C, and that's C major 7 add sharp 6. Very unusual progression, but that just outlines, the power chords that are in the song. Because then it just goes to, 5 chords or power chords. But that opening definitely sticks with you after a while. Next is Fall Together, which is also from the Maladroit album, and we're in standard tuning. And it's a pretty basic, power chord based riff, but it rocks. Something like this. Pretty much. So you're just banging on this F sharp, then you're also kind of lifting up the root of this B5 to that open A string like this. Like that. So you start with it open, add the B, and then open it up again. Like that. And then you hear this kind of open E to this F power chord. Like that. Second time he does a little bit more with that open E, like that. Then you just start scratch and sniff, this F sharp 5 to A5 to E5 back to F sharp. Examples from the song Burnt Jam, which is also from Maladroit, so I apologize for getting hung up on Maladroit, but it's such a great album. And this is kind of a clean, funky, guitar part. I really like this progression too, something like this. starting with this A major 7. And then you're going to basically change that to an A6 right there. Pick up that F sharp note on the B string. And then you're going to twist this and you're going to move to this. And that's basically a B minor 7 right there. Right there, you're going to move that A back to that G sharp, and that's going to change that to a B minor 6. So I really like this progression where you've got A major 7 to A6, and then B minor 7 to B minor 6. Really cool. For those funky guitar parts. I love that stuff. Just gonna wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Weezer, and I'm definitely a fan. You know, it may not be like my favorite band of all time or anything like that, but I know back in the 90s when I first, kind of fell into their music, I liked it. And I was like, hey, this is kind of refreshing, it's different, it's laid back, it's not intense and crazy, progressive metal or whatever. It's like, no, this is just kind of kick back music and, whatever, a party or something or a group of friends. And speaking of friends, I do have some friends that hate Weezer, and then I have friends that absolutely love them and have seen them in concert, multiple times. So it is one of those love-hate kind of bands. You either really like Weezer or you really don't. And there's a bunch of bands like that, the Beatles and Bon Jovi and whoever. It's like, okay, either you love them or you don't, or you might be somewhere right in the middle, kind of neutral. But I like Weezer. I like nerd rock because it's different, it's unusual. It's not as serious, as some forms of music. It's kind of comical and silly, sometimes, and I like that. I mean, I like music. Obviously, I love, guitar and music, but I also like comedy and comedians and Saturday Night Live and stuff like that and whatever. So when you can kind of merge, like Frank Zappa said, does humor belong in music? Yeah, I think it does. Maybe not all the time, but when you can merge like a sense of humor with, musicianship and musicians, if you can make music work, I mean, look at somebody like Weird Al or whoever. If you can, kind of merge comedy and music together, that's really awesome because you can not only make people impressed with your musicianship, you also turn around and make them giggle or laugh, which is awesome. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.